Good afternoon. How is everybody? It's a beautiful day today, so I guess a lot of you'll be outside not watching this live. I'm not going to try and keep up with your questions. I have a fantastic supporter who's going to be taking your questions and firing them over to me once I've finished this first part of the update. So I thought we'd start today. Hi, everybody. I thought we'd start today with the quote at the very start of the book, which says, "Justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are." I think we've covered the outrage well and truly. You guys have been trying to keep up with your comments during the week, but obviously there are so many of them. But I think outrage would appear to be the overwhelming response, especially those of you that are reading the book or have read the book. So one of the questions that came up this week, I actually had to go back through the old media coverage in order to answer it. And I found I'm just going to bring this in because I found it. I found this. Now this is the picture. Oops. This is the picture that they put on posters all over the area for the first Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the first 4 days of the investigation, with the questions saying things like, "Did you see Jody after 5 o'clock on Monday the 30th? How would anybody know if they'd seen a 14-year-old girl?" And like I said, that was a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They didn't change until the Friday evening. So again, right from the off, a picture of a small child. Now, I lived and worked in the area, as everybody knows, and I had people come into my workplace saying, "I thought it was a teenager." And I was like, "Yeah, so did I." So that picture was everywhere in this entire area. How would anybody know if they'd seen Jody, if that was what they were being asked to look out for? So that's just because I came up with that while I was looking for the answer to one of the questions that came up this week. So the question was about the Andreina Bryson sighting. And there were two parts to it. One part was she didn't identify Luke in court. Well, it was 18 months, 19 months later, and he would have changed in that time, which is fair comment. But the other part of the question was, well, if the two people seen by Andreina Bryson were not Luke and Jody, who were they and why did they never come forward? And this is where the media footage comes into play. So these are all old newspaper articles that I printed off back in the day. Still got them. I don't know if you can see the date. Yep, Saturday, 5th of July, 2003. So let's just have a look. This one, there's not been a single reported sighting of Jody after she left her home at 5 p.m. July 7th, police still have no confirmed sightings of Jody after she left her home around 5 p.m. Now, interestingly, in this one, this is July 7th. And people have argued that the boys on the moped were treated as suspects and they weren't ruled out, blah, 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 blah. Detectives also revealed that two boys spotted playing on a moped near the pathway on Monday night have now been eliminated from their inquiries. This is Monday, the 7th of July. So no chance to check if their stories were correct, no DNA results to check against, just eliminated. One came forward on the Saturday, one came forward on the Sunday, eliminated by the Monday. Okay. Friday, 11th July. Meanwhile, officers have drawn a blank in their efforts to identify witnesses who might have seen her last movements. There have still been no confirmed sightings of the teenager after she left her home. But on this one, on Wednesday, they issued an appeal for a blonde woman who may have seen Jody in the hours leading up to the murder. And is it this one or the next one? No, this one. And on Tuesday, they said they wanted to speak to the drivers of 2 cars seen parked in the turning area of Newbattle High School. So they are putting out calls for people to come forward. This blonde girl pushing a buggy and these 2 drivers. Definitely putting out calls for people to come forward. Tuesday, July 15th, so 2 weeks after the murder, there have still been no confirmed sightings of the teenager after she left home. The morning of July 16th, police have not yet had a confirmed sighting of the teenager after she left her home. And then on the evening of July 16th, 2 witnesses have told police they saw a mystery man walking behind murdered schoolgirl Jody Jones on the night she died. Police revealed the major breakthrough today, just 24 hours after Jody's mum and relatives made emotional appeals for help solving the case. So right up to the 16th of July, no confirmed sightings and calls for other people to come forward that were seen in the area, but no calls for a male and a female seen at the entrance to the path. None. Question is, why not? We know those statements about the male and the female at the end of the path were taken 2nd and 3rd July. This is the 16th, and they're still saying there's been no confirmed sightings. So why, after the first confirmed sightings, did they ignore them and go with the clearly unconfirmed sightings? So the answer to the question, who were those other 2 people if they were not Jody and Luke, and why did they not come forward, is nobody was looking for them. Nobody was asking for them to come forward. Nobody even knew they existed right up to the 16th of July. So while I was doing this run through of the media coverage, I also came across the information about the tramp. So this is Monday, 18th August. And this is, you know, they were looking for a tramp in a cave. And forensic and DNA tests had been carried out on items found inside, including a pair of walking boots and a sleeping bag, which had been set on fire. And I'd forgotten about this bit. Officers are also investigating the sighting of a man seen leaving the woods to the northwest of the crime scene carrying a bundle the day after the murder. He was spotted by golfers in Newbattle Golf Course on July 1st. The mystery man retreated back into the woods. We do not have a clear description of what he looked like. We need to know who this person was. Did they look for him? To my knowledge, never found him. The path was opened the next again day, by the way. Again, they haven't traced the mystery man following Jody. They haven't traced the person with the bundle, but they've reopened the path to the public anyway. Last bit of media coverage. This is Tuesday, 26th of August, so 7 weeks approximately after the murder. Detectives hunting the killer of teenager Jody Jones are expected to present a report to the Procurator Fiscal in the case before the end of the week and hope for an arrest in the near future. Remember this date, 26th August. He said, "We have made a significant breakthrough in the hunt for DNA evidence surrounding this case, and our officers are expecting to make an arrest over the next few days. At this point, I cannot reveal where the evidence has been retrieved from, but it is the most significant breakthrough to date. To this end, we're currently making sure there are no last-minute hitches. We're almost ready to submit our evidence in a report to the Procurator Fiscal, who will decide whether there is enough proof to bring a murder charge. We are confident this will happen, and an arrest and charges will be brought against an individual." What happened? Where's the DNA? What did it turn up? What did the tests reveal. I don't think I've ever turned up the results, DNA results, around this date in the files. I won't say 100% I haven't, but I'm pretty sure I have never found DNA results around this date. So this is the second time they put out information into the public domain that either they were waiting for DNA results to prove their main line of inquiry earlier in the investigation, and then obviously when the DNA results came back with nothing of Luke. Yeah, where did they go with that? Now we have a second set of DNA results. Where are they? What did they reveal? Because they obviously weren't enough to take the case for the arrest and charge as they'd expected. Again, what were they? Okay, on to your other questions this week. Oops. So the grounding and the story about meeting at the top end of the path and this standing arrangement for Luke to meet Jody at the East House's end of the path. A lot of people have been talking about this. Well, the evidence itself tells us that there was no grounding in place that afternoon. We know that Jody was with Luke on Saturday. We know she was out on Sunday and she came back about 9:30, according to her mum, who didn't ask where she'd been. She just assumed she'd been with Luke. Jody's gran and her sister both said in statements and in evidence that the grounding had ended or petered out a week or two beforehand. So there was no grounding in place on the night of June 30th. So this whole story about the grounding suddenly being lifted and Jody frantically texting Luke, no. According to the evidence, and her sister had good reason to remember when the grounding ended, because it started on a day that she had an exam at school, came home early and found Jody skipping school, and that was the start of Jody's punishment. So she had very good reason to remember the particular date. The meeting at the top of the path. So Jody wasn't allowed to use the path. Luke had to come up and meet her and walk her back down. Again, there is no evidence that standing arrangement ever existed. None. It was simply inserted into the narrative to suggest that Luke would have been at that end of the path at that time of night. We know Janine was asked directly on the stand. You know, your mother knew perfectly well that Jody used that path on her own, and Janine said yes. And Donald Finlay gave her a second chance. He said, really? And she said, yes. So Jody would have walked down the path on her own, summer's evening, like tonight, bright, sunny, before it rained. She would have had no reason not to walk down it. And if you think about it, Jody's mum, first of all, said that they were going to be hanging about in East House's Mayfield area. So she wouldn't have had to go down the path at all. But if she was going down the path and there was a standing arrangement, then her mum would have had no need to be concerned because she would have been with Luke. But it was just to answer the confusion about the grounding and the arrangement to meet at the top of the path. Neither existed, or neither were correct when you look at the evidence. Okay, next one. Now, this is about timings in particular. This is what brought up this subject, with somebody talking about timings, but it applies to all the other discrepancies, if you like, differences that come up between, for example, in the James English podcast, some of the things that I've said and some of the things that Corinne said. And what people have to understand is when I speak about this stuff, it's from the precise times of the case papers, because that's my job. That's what I have to do. But when family members speak about things like this, and certainly when I'm not in criminologist mode, I do it myself. What time did you have lunch? Oh, 1ish. What time did you call your daughter? Oh, it's about 10:30. I wouldn't say 10:32 because I'm not logging the time that precisely for my normal everyday life. It's only when I'm working that I have to be so precise, and I wouldn't expect anybody else to have that level of precision. So the particular question that came up was about Luke calling Jody's house that night and what time he went out after tea. And Corinne had said he went out at 5:40ish. Now remember, the two calls have been talked about a lot. So 5:40ish is the period that covers the two calls that Luke made to Jody's mum's landline at work mode, 5:32 and 5:38. So do you see the difference? When I speak about things like this, it's completely based on case papers. And in normal conversation, people don't speak like that. So, 5:40-ish, 5:32, 5:38, in that ballpark area is how I would speak normally. Okay. Question about sending stamps. As far as I know, you can't. It's just not allowed. Prisoners have to buy their stamps from the prison. Now, it may have changed during lockdown. I don't think it did, and I've not had a chance to check because this question didn't come up till the weekend. So I will get back on that one and let everybody know. But I'm pretty sure it's still the case that you simply can't send stamps to prisoners. Right, another one that came up this week that's caused a lot of questions is this thing about the pictures of Luke in the media when he was a minor, and why was that allowed? Why was he allowed to be pictured, and why was he allowed to be named? So let me try to explain that. Back then, the media were not allowed to name anybody once legal proceedings had begun. Okay, so between July and April 2004, there were no legal proceedings against Luke. He hadn't been arrested, he hadn't been charged, he wasn't being taken to court. There were no legal proceedings against him. And so they were free to take his picture, name him, put this stuff all over the media. When he was arrested and charged on 14th April 2004, this protection that he couldn't be named for legal reasons, because legal proceedings had begun, kicked into place because he was a minor. Two newspapers actually did name him that day on April 14th, 2004, which should have been a breach of this protection that he can't be named for legal reasons because legal proceedings had started. And they got around this by saying Luke hadn't had his first appearance in court. So he'd been arrested, he'd been charged, he was in custody, but he hadn't had his first appearance in court when these newspapers reported his name. I'd never, ever, ever seen it interpreted that way, ever. What is the point of a protection that will always have that gap because they don't appear in court the minute they're charged and arrested? It's usually the following day, which would mean the entire media would be free to report the name in that gap in between. So, like I said, I'd never seen it done that way before, but that was how it was allowed to pass in this case. And then they couldn't name Luke from the April to the July because he was a minor. And the minute he turned 16 in the July, they were free to name him again. And as I said before, the judge believed that that media coverage would not have influenced the jury, and what risk there was of it influencing the jury was taken care of with a warning to them that they were not to take into account anything that they'd read in the media. So I don't really know what else I can say about that. Okay, two questions that I've had several times, either in comments on different threads or in private messages. Who was Stocky Man? And who is the man who can't be named for legal reasons? Well, I'll take the second one first. Who is the man who can't be named for legal reasons? The answer's in the question. Those legal reasons apply as much to me as they do to anybody else. I can't say. Now, Stocky Man, try that in English. Stocky Man was identified, but his name in relation to that identification has never been in the public domain. And that's why I can't say who he is. So asking me questions about who Stocky Man is, or if he's this person or that person or the other person, I can't say. I'm really sorry. That is just the way it is. We didn't find out about the identification until 2014. And that's when we got the identification and the name. But it's never been in the public domain. And as a result, I can't disclose any, disclose any information about that. I've seen lots of stuff this week, people putting up posters and putting out leaflets, and that is fantastic. That is really, really, really great. Just getting the word out there, letting people see, even people who don't know what it's about. If they see a poster, they might think, oh, what's that? And have a look. And it might encourage them to go and find out more. So great job. Well done, everybody. That's really, really, really good, and really pleased to see it. Another thing I was thinking about, we have an election coming up. So MPs are going to be out trying to get your votes. So why not ask them, are you going to do the right thing? I even thought, like, hashtag do the right thing. Ask the MP that wants your vote. Will you do the right thing in this case? Because you're not getting my vote if you won't. You know what I mean? Just put the question to them. And if they don't know about it, I have some books that people have bought and said, keep them for anybody important that you think should read the story. So I've kept them aside. I've had 3 leaflets through the door for local MPs looking for votes. So I'm going to approach each of the 3 of them, ask them, if you get elected, will you do the right thing, and give them a book. So it's another thing to think about, especially election time. They want your votes, people. So yeah, there's another way of trying to get the politicians to get involved, to realise that this simply cannot keep happening. It can't keep going on. And like I've said before, it's not just Luke. There are other cases across Scotland, across the UK, where this is happening, and so few people know about it. And we really need to hold them accountable. We really need to say, no, you're doing this in our names, and we want it done properly. Because, as I've said so many times, it's not just incarcerating the wrong people that's the problem here. It's leaving the real perpetrators out here among us. So, that's I do that as much for that reason as I do for the wrongly accused and convicted. Now, there have been lots and lots and lots of exciting developments going on behind the scenes, most of which I'm sorry I can't actually update about right now. But I want to say a huge thank you to the people who've got in touch privately to give me information, either information that they tried to give at the time and were ignored, or information that they didn't think was important at the time, in part because of media coverage, that they've now thought, oh, hang on, maybe. So here's my plea. It doesn't matter how unimportant or insignificant or anything else you think it might be. Please, please, please get in touch. If there's anything at all that you thought about at the time, or you're thinking out, oh, right enough back then, just contact me. Nothing anybody tells me will ever be released. No names, no information. It will all be completely confidential, so there's no need to be concerned about any sort of repercussions or anything like that. But please, 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 if you have anything that you think might be significant, or even if you think it might not, but it's just a little niggle, let me know, please. Because you never know when one of these little things is going to link two apparently unconnected pieces together and give us one very strong piece of information. So that is a really important please. Okay, now what about your questions? Are we ready? Let's go to your questions. Hang on, because I need to have a look and see if they've come in, because I'm having them emailed to me. Okay. No, they're not in yet. Just give me 1 second. Sorry about this. Just a second. Oh, I think we've got them now. Here we go. Okay. Who gave the media a copy of a small child and not a recent one? It would have to have been taken from Jody's family. Why did they do it? I have no idea. I don't mean why did Jody's family do it. It may have been the only photographs they had to hand. Why did the police do it? I have no idea. What's happening about the fund for Corinne? We're still working on this in the background. We can't do a GoFundMe because of the difficulties of it being stated publicly that the money was going to Luke. If you can bear with me on that one, I will get back to you when I can. If the police weren't blaming Luke, what time period could be given for the time of death? Now, that's a difficult question. We know she was found about 11:35. And if we take the sightings of when she was being followed by Stocky Man, then that's 5:05. And that is probably as much as I can say. Any time between 5:05 and, well, I'm saying 20, did I say 25 to 11? 25 to 12, sorry. So the search party were coming back down the path. I don't know, 11:15. Luke got up there about 11 o'clock. So yeah, between 5:05 and 11 o'clock, any time in that period is still an open possibility. How was her time of death determined? The police brought in an analyst to identify a window of opportunity for Luke to have been the killer. They did not look at windows of opportunity for anybody else. Is it possible the moped boys were trying to cause a distraction at the tool shop? I don't know if it's what they were trying to do. They certainly caused a racket, but I suppose anything's possible. Why was nothing done about the knife found years later? Because we were too late finding out about it, is the answer to that. And by the time it was, we were trying to follow up on it, it was too late. What time was the cousin's dad walking the 8 dogs, and was the blood on his shoe tested? Now again, this is a strange one, because we don't actually know what time the cousin's dad was walking his dogs. The statements say anywhere between about 6:15 and 8:30 that night. So we don't have a time that we can say for sure that he was on the path, only that he was walking the dogs. Not so much on the path, but on the woodland strip, because he said he went across the field to the viewpoint, gave the command over, and the dogs all jumped over the wall. But in terms of time, we don't know. We don't know. I think there's some more questions. Just give me a second. Yeah. Why is everyone under the impression the party left from Mayfield when in the book they were all at Jody's house? No. In the book it's absolutely clear they left from Mayfield. The suggestion that they left from Jody's house was actually made in the Court of Appeal document, where they said the search trio had left from Jody's house just a few minutes from the path. That absolutely was not the case. And according to all the testimony, they left from the Grand's house in Mayfield and walked down there, which gave rise to the difficulty with the timings. Because if they left at the time they said they left, and they walked from Mayfield to the junction of the paths where they were waiting for Luke, it wouldn't have been possible for them to get there before Luke if the times they gave were correct. It would actually have made more sense if they'd been at Jody's mum's house and left when they said they left. Then they could have been waiting for Luke by the time he got up there, but certainly not if they left from Mayfield and walked down. The question about if they were at Jody's mum's house would have to be, why were they at Jody's mum's house? In terms of timing, I mean. And certainly, if Jody's mum didn't know Jody was missing until almost 11:15, there still wouldn't have been time for the search trio to get from Mayfield to Jody's mum's house. Even if they left immediately, our mum realised she hadn't been with Luke, there still wouldn't have been time for them to get to our mum's house and then back out to meet Luke at the top of the path. But according to their statements, they didn't know Jody was definitely missing until about 11:05, in which case they definitely could not have been in her mum's house in time to get to the top of the path before Luke did. Okay, some more questions. What is Jody's family opinion on Luke being innocent? They are absolutely convinced that Luke is guilty. And it's not any surprise, because that's what they've been being told for years. On the James English podcast, you said if you were police, there would be 3 people of interest. Have you ever thought it could be someone out with these 3 people? Oh, yes. The question on the James English podcast was, of the people that had already come up, what would have been my opinion had I been a police officer? But certainly, there are others out with those 3 people that could equally have been the perpetrators. Why wasn't the scene cleaned properly and only bleach used? I'm not sure. The only thing I know is that the scene was bleached before the sniffer dogs, the tracker dogs, were brought in. So 12 days into the investigation, the dogs were brought in, but the scene had already been bleached, and the dog handler's report said the dogs were hampered in their search because the area had been bleached. Can you put money into Luke's Canteen fund? Yes, you can. You'll only need his, I believe, his prison number and his date of birth, and obviously his name. So if you just Google sending money to a prisoner in Scotland, and I've seen a lot of people commenting, the rules are different in Scotland and England, and some of the things that apply to English prisons don't apply to Scottish prisons, and vice versa. So just make sure you, if you Google it, you're looking for Scotland. Okay, what else do we have? I know he's had failed appeals. What else can be done to get him heard? Okay, first thing that can be done is that the case can be, another application can be made to the SCCRC. And there are a number of approaches that can be taken to that, which is part of what's being discussed behind the scenes at the minute. So the obvious one would be new evidence. If there was new evidence, we could go back to the Commission and say, well, this constitutes new evidence. Now, I did speak before about what we lay people would consider new evidence does not meet the legal definition of new evidence. But if we found information that met the legal definition of new evidence, yes, that could go back to the SCCRC and they could examine it, and they could, on that basis, decide to refer it back to the Court of Appeal. That is the only official route at the moment to getting back to the Court of Appeal, which is why we are looking at this petition for an independent review, because the Commission, as a general rule, will not look at the police investigation as was. So our suggestions of police wrongdoing and that sort of thing, well, they already ruled that the police failed to disclose information to the defence and still came to the conclusion that it wasn't a problem. So there are difficulties with trying to use the SCCRC exclusively in this case. So in answer to the question, that is the only official route back at the moment. We are looking at other possibilities which have to be discussed behind the scenes. If and when I can update on those, I will. But that's where we're at the minute. I think there was one more question here. Do you think when the police didn't have the evidence against Luke, they intentionally used the media to form Luke's character, and the police then covered up a botched investigation? In a nutshell, yeah, I do. And I haven't seen anything to persuade me otherwise. How a police investigation could go forward on the basis of, well, what I've put in the book, what we've talked about, what the documentaries covered, is beyond me. If it was a genuine investigation, how did it go so badly wrong? How did they get it so badly wrong? And why did that runaway train keep running? You know, when the evidence didn't turn up. So for example, in the first 2 weeks, when they were waiting for the forensic reports, and they were just waiting for the results to confirm their main line of inquiry. And the report said, I was actually looking for it, but I didn't have time to find it. The report said, if not, we're back to square one. Okay, so the main line of inquiry was Luke. And in this press briefing, they said, if the DNA results don't support our main line of inquiry, we'll be back to square one. And then they didn't go back to square one, not at all. They just kept going. So you have to look at the willingness there to actually go with the evidence rather than a particular narrative. Because the evidence there, right at that point when it came back and there was nothing to look, should have been, uh-oh, rethink, it's not there. And it wasn't. So we're all free as citizens to draw our own conclusions about that. What do you think about what the police did with that information? And do you think it was good enough? Would it be good enough for you? Because that really is what we're looking at. The police, by consent, the police in our names, for us, is that good enough? And if not, we as citizens have a right to say so and a right to demand that it be done properly. Now, let me see if there are any more, because a murder of that nature, you would think the person would have struck again. Wonder why not? Well, there could be a number of reasons why not. And I am not saying any of these are the case. I'm just saying there are a number of circumstances that could explain it. So first of all, he could have moved away and not be here anymore. He could have been a traveller, a vagrant who moved from place to place, and he just left afterwards. He could be dead. He could be in prison or similar somewhere. So that's the first thing. No similar murders. Why not? But is it actually true there have been no similar murders in that period? Now, I did a bit of research towards the end of the book at other murders in the area. Even if there were similar murders, and Scotland's not a very big place. We know Scotland's not a very big place, so if we had a serial killer in Scotland, they could quite easily strike from Aberdeen to the borders, and be away in quite a short period of time, really. But if there are others, try that in English, if there are others, there will be no will from an investigation point of view to link them and sort of look at it and say, could these have been the same person? Particularly where similar murders have each had an individual convicted for them. Because if they were committed by the same person, then there's at least one of those going to have to be re-examined, because it can't have been the convicted person if it was a serial killer who committed another crime. And there are two particular murders that they're near the end of the book where exactly that scenario becomes apparent. There are two very, very similar murders, one just before Jody and then Jody, both in Woodland, both women attacked, throats cut, both young males convicted for the crimes. There would never be any will to investigate that as potentially the same killer, because in both cases they got their conviction. Don't want to look at it again. But it's an interesting question. Okay, there was another one there. Something about why were they allowed to change their statements? Again, I think I've explained this. The changing statements in itself is not necessarily indicative of lying. So I think an example I gave on one of the comment threads was, if I say, well, it was a Monday, I would have been in Tesco because I always go to Tesco on my way home from work on a Monday. And then somebody reminds me later on that I wasn't at work that day, I was on holiday. I would have to go back and change my statement and say, that's not right. I forgot I was on holiday that day. And I need to amend my statement. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. The problem we have in this case is 3 people describing very similar things individually, then all change their statements to say something completely different, but each of them is saying the same different thing, if you understand what I mean. And I explained before about adopting statements on the stand. They didn't adopt their earlier statements. They stuck with the statement that said, the dog did nothing, Luke went straight to the V. He didn't show any emotion, all of that. And because they didn't adopt their earlier statements, there's nothing to be done about that. Was Janine ever treated as a suspect? Her boyfriend's DNA was found on Jody's body and clothes. No, her boyfriend's DNA was found on her clothes. No, she wasn't. No. Somebody asked, can the DNA be retested? That's a difficult route. Of course it can, and especially now that we have new techniques and new technology and everything, that is that's something that I believe, talking to some of the experts, would yield results now that couldn't have been obtained back in 2003. The problem is having the samples released for retesting. Now, again, my question here is, why not just release them and have them retested? Because the technology is such, they had no DNA of Luke at the time. The technology as such now is that there is a possibility that it could turn up Luke's DNA, which would be in their favour. So there's no real reason for them not to release them for retesting, because it could go as much in their favour as it could in Luke's. But I think they're more worried about it going in Luke's favour, to be honest. Right, sorry, there's a lot of these I can't answer, so I'm just... Change of statements is fine, but all changes should be shown and available in court. Karen, I totally agree with that. And I do think people need to understand, or it should be explained to jurors about adopting statements. Instead of the defence having to turn cartwheels to try and get them back to their original statements, I think it should just be explained to jurors that, you know, if they've changed their statements, they're allowed to do that, but their earlier statements, yada, yada, yada. But I don't, they're never going to explain it to jurors. It's stuff like this, you guys asking. If you ever get called for jury service now, you know about adopting statements. You know about earlier statements and later statements and changed statements. So bear it in mind. Changing statements could be due to police pressure, maybe. If the police are trying to cover something up or wanting something to go their way, they can make that happen too. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how to... It was clear for me that the police were going in a particular direction with this from the off. Absolutely from the off. We don't know how many people were manipulated and persuaded or bullied or coerced or whatever. We do know that a lot of the younger witnesses, the police were putting pressure on them and their parents. And I know that because the parents have told me, or the young people who've grown up now have told me. So we do know there was elements of that going on in various aspects of the investigation. I don't see why it would be any different with Jody's family. There was a question about the parka jacket. I'm not going to speak about the speaking clock today. I have lost count of the questions about the speaking clock. Question about the parka jacket. Yeah, so somebody pulled me up, and it's a very good point. I should have made it more clear. You said there was no forensic evidence in the log burner, but there was ash. Correct. And I apologise for that. What I meant was there was no forensic evidence of any clothing having been burned in the log burner. So clearly there was ash because they took the ash away to test it. They also tested all the brickwork. And there was no opportunity for Corinne to dispose of ash or debris, burnt debris or anything like that, because the liaison officer was in her house from the day they came back from the police station. So they got back to the police station. They left at 7 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And that afternoon, the liaison officer was at their house. And then they were watched. They were watched, that every move was watched from then on in. So there was no possibility that Corinne could have got rid of anything after Luke was taken to the police station. The evening before, so between whenever it was that the neighbours claimed there was a fire, 7 o'clock-ish, and then 10 o'clock-ish, and then midnight, Corinne's on her way, or just after midnight, Corinne's on her way up to the police station. So the only window there is the after 10 o'clock, because there was still a fire at 10 o'clock. The suggestion being that the rain had put out an earlier fire and started a new one. Now, bear in mind, there's actually nothing to support for certain that there was a fire in the garden that night. The neighbours directly next door said that they smelled wood smoke, but they weren't sure what night it was. The neighbour directly across the back is the one that said it was definitely that night, and there was a funny smell, a strange smell coming from smoke. But there were 30 odd other statements from neighbours, because the houses all backed onto each other, the gardens all backed onto each other. There's 30 odd statements from other people that said either there was no fire or they smelled nothing not untoward that night. But there was one statement from a neighbour who'd set fire to a citronella candle in the garden a few nights after the murder. Now, when I say set fire, I don't mean to the wick, I mean the entire candle. I don't know if you've ever set fire to a citronella candle, they stink. So that would have been an unusual smell. And the problem because of the way these gardens are laid out, it'd be impossible to tell which one the smoke might be coming from, unless you were like sitting on top of it. So yeah, the idea that there was no forensic evidence, there were ash because logs had been burned in it, but there was no forensic evidence that clothing had been burned there at any point. And likewise, I said there was no evidence brought into court. Well, there wasn't, except for these statements from the couple of neighbours. So really just the one neighbour who said he smelled strange smelling smoke. There was no forensic evidence brought into court because there was none. So that's all they had in terms of what they were calling evidence to support that the parka was burned there. Okay, I think that's us for today. Is Corinne happy with the support? Yes, very, very. It's I don't think we've ever seen so much interest and support for Luke's case and for getting it reinvestigated, and for having not just you guys getting in touch, but other people experts in their fields also getting in touch and saying, can I give you my thoughts? Can I give you an opinion? Do you have ideas about this and this and this? So really, it's just a huge opening up of the case that we've been waiting nearly 18 years to happen. So yeah, you can imagine how everybody feels about that. But it's I've been here almost an hour tonight. I actually have a really sore throat today. So I'm going to call it a day at that. Once again, thank you for all your good wishes for Corinne, which I will make sure are passed on to her as well. And I will see you all next week. Thanks to our lovely supporter for sending the questions to me. That was a lot easier than trying to follow them up and down the side there. Thanks to all of you for coming in to listen and for everything that you're doing to keep this right up there. We need to keep the pressure on, guys. So, okay, enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and I will see you all next week. Same time, same place. Thanks a lot. Bye. Oops.